Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Business, and this is a much delayed and intentionally delayed episode of Ships and Giggles 41. And yes, it's okay. It's all the Alaska again. So I promise this is legitimately the last footage that I have that I'm going to show of the Alaska until whenever it gets released again. But there's some really good stuff in here, and as you can see, there's a Moskva and a Yamato in the northern part of the map, and I'm like, nah man, I ain't about to let them come around and get on our flank and mess us up as our team just continues to push and chase ships. I'm gonna see if I can make something happen here, and we get some damage. AP from the Yamato, and obviously, and HE from Moskva, which I'm guessing he's switching over to AP and gonna make my life hell, but instead he goes broadside. And that's a paddling, man. Kapow! Oh god, that was glorious. And the best part is, not done yet, so now trying to figure out what the Yamato's gonna do. So go ahead, pop Hydro, reveal his position, try to give myself some way of figuring out how to get into this situation where I can maybe do some significant damage to him, and if I die, then hopefully he'll be an easy kill for my teammates as well. So I'm trying to reduce my rate of turn here to keep my Citadel flat, which ends up working pretty well. So you're gonna see in chat, he's not too fond of what just happened. So again, basically with ships that have their Citadel just at the waterline or just below, another huge hit. I was really hoping to knock him out right there for a dev strike, but they were close to it. It just didn't happen, and I just obviously can't turn enough here. Gonna aim for the hangar doors as he's swinging around his rear turret, and we get actually pretty solid damage in that spot. I haven't really had too much success aiming for their with the Alaska. A lot of bounces because it ends up going towards the rear and bouncing off the angled armor there, and there we go. So he missed with his rear turret, but you know, trying to keep the Citadel flat instead of turning and basically lifting it up out of the water to allow these other ships, I mean any ship can Citadel any other ship if you start lifting that Citadel up out of the water when you're close up, like that turn in, basically lifting the skirt up of the ship. See it all the time in close quarters engagements, and damn, I wish those ships were going slower, but we got the Confederate with Halsey and the reload boost, and that was quite the push. And as far as I'm aware, that's the highest. I mean, I know that's the highest damage I've done. I think it's the highest damage still on the NA server for the Alaska, so I'm sure that'll go to the wayside as soon as it's released. You know, people somehow managing 250, 300, 350,000 damage games, because that's what happens. And yeah, it's not a source of pride, I promise, but the amount of Citadels there, hell yeah it is. So that's pretty cool. But myself and this Lightning here, we hold this flank down pretty damn well against overwhelming odds here. So props to this guy as he's getting picked on, and there's just nothing I can do. I was really trying to get rid of that Z-23, and now I'm just seeing if I can hold this flank for a better opportunity to inflict damage. And around this time, I just don't have enough support, and it's time for me to see if I can make a breakout here with what little health I have left. So Seattle's coming out, and yeah, get a nice little chunky hit there. And in a second, I'll go over to why the video has been delayed, but we'll get there in a second, I promise. The Alaska, you can't really do this with the Alaska shooting at you. Sorry, dude. Oh, man. So, like, okay, well, that's actually a pretty interesting development. So let's see about curling back into this, because that really did change the dynamic of the situation, because now the engagement here against these other ships is a lot closer to where it should be. You know, we've got, I think that's an Amagi over there, we've got the Buffalo, and, you know, throwing shells down on him, trying to see if I can knock him out with some Citadels. And almost. So we get a few citadels there, just not enough, and I'm trying to bring the rear turret around, switch to the view from that by hitting C, but unfortunately don't get anything there other than an overpen. So pressing in against the Gneisenau now here, and the Z-23 I'm expecting he's got to be somewhere. And so I've got my Hydro up, and I'm just waiting for Torps to be coming in at the least opportune time. And sure enough, there they are. So I started doing the, my anxiety was like, okay, I can't really go much more forward here, so it's time to start this turn. And lucky on the timing there, because made myself slim, got through those Torps, great. Hit the brakes immediately after killing off the Gneisenau, because, of course, there's Torps. So, running into these situations with Hydro active is always beneficial, of course, just because any lead time that you can get on where those torpedoes are is a huge help in being able to survive and react. So, managed to get the front turrets on the Z-23, rear turret on the Buffalo, and wait for it, double strike to end the match. Beautiful. So props to that guy and the Lightning. He really did a lot to help me out there and prevent them from pushing earlier than they did. So unfortunately, that's not something that's going to be reflected in the scoreboard at the end, but it was really important for him to be there because it was just him and myself. You know, we didn't really have much help from the rest of the team as far as really making that flank happen, but that flank is where we ended up winning the game, so that was awesome. But as far as the delay on the video, I do apologize, but there's just so much going on with the game and so much testing that I've had to do, and the CV rework is just an all-encompassing change. There's just there's no real point for me to show much in the way of the carrier gameplay. I've had some amazing matches with it, and I've had some really bad matches with it, but the fact of the matter is that I have played multiple times more carrier games since the patch 8.0 was released than I ever did before, which I can tell you I played less than 10 matches. So in my opinion, that's a big win, because now I'm not just playing battleships, destroyers, or cruisers. I'm playing battleships, destroyers, cruisers, and carriers, and I actually find it fun. That's a huge difference, and in that respect, the CV rework has worked. It's been effective because it's taken me, who just would not play carriers because I just thought the interface was dog shit. The experience was dog shit on both sides of it. I didn't like playing carriers because of the experience for other people as well as my own. It was a terrible experience, and the fact that that has changed and now I'm actually playing them and I'm enjoying it says a lot. That's not to say there aren't issues with it. I really want people to understand that. I'm not saying everything's perfect with the game. Put down your fucking pitchforks, because people really, really want to jump on anybody who possibly thinks that, you know, these changes are good for the game or blah blah blah. Which is another part of the reason why it's been delayed, because I wanted most of that to die down, or some of that to die down at the very least, before I started, you know, putting up videos talking about it. And I will say the other thing too, the hotfixes, it's exactly what I was worried about with, if you go back to the previous Ships and Giggles, where, you know, I talked about the previous experience where in closed beta they took way too goddamn long to fix like game-breaking issues, and the Haku in the initial release of 8.0 was absolutely game-breaking, and people exploited that to ridiculous results. And I was really hoping that they'd be like, haha, fuck you guys, we're gonna wipe your stats on these carriers for the you know, initial patch or whatever, because it's so bloated that you can't possibly think that's good for the game, and people were so desperate to jump on the Haku and see if they could, you know, do some damage record or something. I mean, they're actively destroying the game by doing that. And, oh, it's an exploit, but, you know, it's coded as a game, it's Wargaming's fault. No, it's your fucking fault for exploiting it. It's there, it's your choice to do that. Sorry, that's That's just my opinion, but there's a lot of heat and drama surrounding this, and I kind of just wanted a lot of that to die down a bit before throwing my hat into the ring. So, anyways, the CV rework is all over the place, admittedly, and I think the biggest problem that we're dealing with right now is that it's not an environment that's conducive to proper feedback. It's not an environment that can produce effective data because we're dealing with multiple CV games. This is not something that makes any sense to me, and I do not understand why it's so hard for wargaming to figure this shit out. Having multiple carriers in a game completely changes how everybody plays the game. It does, and that's how it is. There's no reason for, especially now with the way planes regenerate, there's zero reason whatsoever to have more than one carrier on each team. And the other part of that too, in the aspect of having multiple carriers in a game, you are thinning out the other games too. So instead of having a game where you have 5 games that drop at the same time, 3 of them have multiple carriers, 2 of them don't have any carriers. So instead of having multiple carriers, now all 5 games have at least 1 carrier. Cool. Now you can have a more an environment that's more conducive to actual feedback, to actual testing, and it's a better experience for everybody. But this 3 CV and 2 CV bullshit at tier 10 is fucking ridiculous. And I don't want to play the game, even if I'm a carrier, when it's like this. And these shots, by the way, I get so many pens because they ended up hitting and penetrating the torpedo belt, but not the armor behind it. So I aimed too low on that, and yeah, huge torpedo bulges on the Colorado. But anyways, the sooner we get back to 1 carrier each side, the better this game is going to be, the better people are going to feel about the game, that sort of thing. It's just, in my opinion, it's incredibly critical that this happens sooner rather than later at all tiers, tier 4 through 10, 1 carrier each side, because we'll have more matches with 1 carrier. And the important part of that is, when you're playing destroyers, the thing that's different now is that a carrier can only do one thing at a time. He can only be offensive and defensive where he has his planes. That's not the case that it was before at all. And that's really interesting because it opens up opportunities for destroyers. Say it's an estuary, and at A you've got a teammate who's being harassed by the enemy carrier. Well, that opens that option up for you at D with your destroyer to get more work done, and that carrier has to make a choice. And that's the interesting part. When there's multiple carriers, there's no choice. You're just running, or you're hiding, or whatever the case, you're staying with your battleships and cruisers to try to have some chance to stay in this match for a bit longer, to be involved in the game. Because what are you going to do otherwise? And, I've seen a lot of destroyers zipping around the map edges and finding the enemy carriers. I've run into that myself a few times. It's like, oh shit, now there's a wall of Yugumo torps right off my port bow. That's great. And that's the benefit and the drawback with the new carriers as far as the utility is concerned, because the player has to make a choice between being defensive and offensive. Once you get to tier 6, you're able to start throwing down, basically summoning fighters to a given area to try to protect your team or yourself or your own fighters, or planes, whatever the case is. And that's a very, very important change. And I think a lot of people have really not sat down and considered what that means when you're playing carriers or in carrier matches. And I really like that, because you have to figure out, if you're playing, when you're playing a carrier, are you able to sacrifice those players on your team for a bit longer so you can get this attack off, or do you try to get over there as fast as possible, summon those fighters to that area, and hopefully ward off an attack on ships that are in critical situations? That's a fascinating position to be in. And that, I really, really like that, because there is no other option other than physically going over there to do that. None. that's amazing. That's totally different than how it was before, and I think the impact of that is huge. But anyhow, I actually think that's probably my favorite aspect of playing carriers now, because it's put my team and myself into really precarious situations. And speaking of which, this poor Jutland, he's in chat like, why are you doing this to me? But just you know, it's I really like that part of the gameplay, and I think that's a great change, because making these tough choices will make or break the match. That's cool. But, you know, also it's different because, you know, as a player, a teammate of a carrier who is trying to attack, you can't really be on them about not being defensive and helping you out, because there's really not that much they can do, which I kind of really like, because it just lets the carriers be carriers. But at the same time, you know, there's some give and take with that too, of course. And I was really hoping I just would have got that shot there against the roam. My God, that would have been a hell of a push there, and it was a good push, but it could have been a little bit more, and that's, you know, I'm happy with the results there. Trust me, I'm more than happy. But there was still some left on the table, and that's what I wanted. So consider that greed, whatever, I don't care. It is what it is. So no, I don't know when the Alaska's being released, and of course all this footage is before the CV rework, otherwise you'd be seeing some different stuff here. So one more suicidal push with the Alaska here in closing with this video, and of course Ships and Giggles, just my outlet for talking about the game and hopefully entertaining you along the way, whereas other videos are more specific to what's happening in those videos and being analytical about that. So, I mean, this last minute of audio is taking me an hour to do, because I don't know where I want to leave this video, whether it's good, bad, or somewhere in between. And there's a lot to like, a lot to dislike, and everybody's frustrated. Everybody's frustrated. And, you know, my main thing is just the match quality. Just, I want the games to be actually fun again, and right now they aren't. There's multiple reasons for that, some of which I've talked about, and a lot of which I won't. But the fact is that this is a huge change for the game. Hopefully the groundwork that's there, which is, I think, really good, hopefully the groundwork that's there gets improved upon, and we can make this game better going forward for the next few years. But we'll see how that goes, and hopefully sooner rather than later we get to find out. But thank you for watching today, guys. I'll see you back here next time. Take care.